Hey guys, this is Mark with Ncengravers. I want to do a quick video and let you know that we are now offering plate cuts for the Canik model slides. Now, I kind of want to just briefly go over that. I want to explain it a little bit better so you have a better understanding of exactly what it is we need when you place an order, how it's going to work, what to expect, things like that. So let's jump into it. So for a long time, we have not done plate cuts on the Canik model slides, and a lot of that just had to do with we couldn't settle on what plate we were going to go with. We saw a lot of people saying, "Hey, I'll just go with a factory Optic ready model slide." So there was a lot of reasons to sort of not do it. And then there were reasons to, well, there's factory slides out there that are Optic cut, so why, why would we do it, right? And we've kind of come to the conclusion that there's a lot of people that do still have slides that are not Optic ready. Of course, these slides have been out on the market for a long time, and we thought, hey, I think now is the time for us to move into that offering, right? There's a lot of optics that just wouldn't work, and mainly the reason that we would not do a direct cut for larger optics like this is because the slide really won't support it. So on a slide like this, you can only cut so deep before you run into issues. And what I mean by that is, the slides are a little bit different on an Optic ready slide, right? So particularly on these where the firing pin goes in the back, they've got a notch that's cut out. If you flip it upside down, you're gonna see it's sort of recessed up in there. And what that means is when you cut down into the slide, you can only cut so far before you cut into that firing pin notch. And really the idea behind that is the firing pin has a square post on it that keeps it from rolling and turning. It keeps it in a direct line. And that's sort of how they use it for alignment. So that's the way it's designed, is it's sort of round, and then it has a rectangular and or square head to it that keeps it, traveling front to back. And that's where it goes. It goes into that little groove right there. And on some of the factory Optic guns, what they've done is they have a dovetail here, and then they did a plate cut up here, right, in this zone up here, and then they shortened up the loaded chamber indicator. So it's much shorter. So on some of those guns, it's up to like here. So they've basically given themselves room to sort of move up front and get out of that channel with still using those same parts, right? So they don't have to manufacture new firing pins or anything like that. They're able to use them in a range of weapons, but since the slide has actually changed and they gain the room up in here, that's allowed them to do a plate cut, right? So, and that's not in all cases. In some cases, they do a plate cut to the rear, and they've got a special plate that they do, and it's got a really big hump in the center. But those are some of the examples of what they've done to sort of overcome these problems as they go. Now, when we talk about doing a deep cut onto one of these slides, that's one of the issues that we run into. So if we were to take one of these optics, which would be an RMR socket, this is an RMR, this is a 507C, and this is the Mechanic 03, what we run into is the optic itself will fit on the gun directly, but if you were to do that, and I'll just use the RMR as an example, if you were to cut down, this is about as deep as you can go, if you were just to cut down and put it in here, what you would find is that there's going to be light, and it's hard to see, my hands are in the way and things. There's going to be light, and you can kind of see light through that screw hole. And what that means is if you were to mount this, that means that down here on the very bottom, right in this section, you would actually see the screw. So if the screw came through the optic, you would see a little bit of the screw right in here that's not really going into the slide, right? And now I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying that it's unsecure or it won't hold up or any of those things. What I am saying is that it's sort of not really appealing when we're talking about a screw that is exposed under the optic before it goes into the slide. Generally speaking, it's not really the best way to do that. It could obviously come loose over time. It could get gunk in there, and then when you go to try to back the screw out, now the screw won't come out. There's a lot of reasons to sort of not do that, right? And also it's because, these slides are tapered. So we have a taper here on this side, we've got a taper on this side. And what we would run into is when we talk about the bottom of these, we talk about posts. They've got posts that support these optics. But when we put these onto a gun like this and we look at it, and it's going to be hard to tell, but if we look at it, what we find is that those posts would be pretty much in the air over here, right? So even if you were to get some sort of a structural post on there or a stud on there, it's not really going to be a full stud. It's not really going to work as intended. And you're going to be back to how tight is the socket? Was the socket cut with a radius in the front? Does it have a straight in the back? How tight is it? Does it work? And then of course we've got screw problems, right? So those are the reasons we would never recommend it. Now, I'm not saying in the past we've never done that. We've had a couple customers throughout the years that said, hey man, I don't really care, I'm just looking to have it done. And we have done it. I would say probably 2018, maybe 19, I might have done one or two, and I really explained it to them that, hey, look, I don't recommend this. I don't think this is a good idea. And at the end of the day, they were after a race gun. I mean, they're not a super expensive replacement part if you're going to get a new slide. So it was one of those, you know, hey, we're going to risk it because we need it. And we kind of went down that path. However, going forward, that is why we made a dedicated video. We've got a different video on our Optic cut service that says we don't cut for that, right? And there's reasons why. When we're talking about losing the rear sight, it really won't fit between the rear sight without hitting the loaded chamber, or we put it on the gun, and of course we have those issues that we kind of just discussed. So with that being said, we decided to cut it for a Glock MOS plate. Now, I understand that there's sort of a wide range of issues there. It's sort of, well, why did you go with the Glock plate? You could have went with a Canik plate, or why didn't you go with, you know, XYZ? You could have went with a, you know, Walter plate or M&P plate or one of the other ones. I think one of the reasons that we went with the Glock plate is because they were universal. And what I mean by that is there's nothing really on these plates that really indicates that it's a Glock plate, right? It doesn't have serrations that align with anything. Some of them do have a curved front like this that would go with the radius of the Glock slide, but not all of them. Some of them are just square and or rectangular. So it's kind of one of those ideas that at the end of the day, you are running a Glock plate on your Canik because that's what we would cut for. It has the most, you know, availability on the market. So if you're talking about getting a plate for an RMR, easily accessible. You want a 509T, you want a, you know, a Steiner MPS, or you want an Acro P2. Maybe you want to go with just, you know, something else that's an oddball, a Vortex Venom, or maybe you want to go with, who knows, maybe a Defender ST. There's plates for these, right? And in some cases, if you were to buy like the Vortex Defender ST, they actually come with a Glock MOS plate in the box, right? So there are some reasons that you would get, you know, more advantages to a Glock plate versus maybe one of the other plates. You buy a 509T, comes with an MOS plate. You buy some of the other ones, I think maybe the Steiner MPS may have one. I'm not sure about the Acro P2. I know a lot of these larger optics that use a dovetail mounting system, they come with a plate. And a lot of times they would come with a Glock plate, right? Because that's the most commonly used. And I'm not saying Glock is like, you know, everybody's going with Glock and nobody's going with Canik. Like, that's not really the conversation point. It's more like the manufacturer of the optic has said, oh, hey, these seem to be the most common. Why don't we provide that with it, since we don't want to stock them separately, right? So they're obviously making those choices themselves. Those aren't things that we're, you know, making a choice as Ncengravers as a business. They're coming with those optics from those manufacturers. So we decided, we thought it would be a good idea to cut for, you know, the MOS plate. It does fit the gun. It's a really nice setup. So the idea here is that it doesn't really break into where the loaded chamber indicator is. And we haven't tested this on all guns. So, and I'm going to get into that in a second. It doesn't really break into this pocket. Even if it did break into this pocket a little bit, it wouldn't make any difference because this loaded chamber indicator does move like this. And what that means is the rear portion of this pocket has a couple thou that really is dead space. So even if we did put it in here and it did break into the pocket a little bit, functionally, it's not going to make any difference on how that's going to function. As far as like, you know, dirt or grime or grit, that's not going to make any difference because it's a sealed plate from this end, so nothing's getting under your optic, so that doesn't make any change there. Talking about the rear of it here, this is a very close cut, so that was one of the reasons why we didn't do these for a while, because I was unsure how well this would come out. This is a very, very close cut where the rear pocket, you know, it has a cutout inside of here for the rear cap that holds the firing pin on, and we do not cut into that. So that's another one of those, like, it's a close call, it's an exact fit kind of thing. But yeah, we don't cut into there. We don't break into this pocket. We don't really break into that pocket. I'm gonna be quite honest with you. I think even if one of the guns was changed over time, because Canik has made different revisions of guns, and it did break into one of those, you know, it broke a little in this pocket or into that pocket, I wouldn't be the end of the world. It's something that is functionally not going to make a difference on how the weapon actually works. So, you know, if for some reason you get one back and there's a, you know, it looks like we broke into the firing pin pocket here or into the loaded chamber indicator pocket, it may be just a different variance of the slide. Once again, they've made a lot of different versions of the same slides over the years, and things could have changed on their end. Maybe they were using a different rear cap. Maybe it was cut a little bit bigger. Maybe they had a different tool path when they were cutting their loaded chamber indicator. Maybe it was a little longer. So those are the things that obviously I could see possibly happening. let's just talk about how it fits. So the plate itself goes in here. This would be a standard Glock socket. So what that means is it's got a ridge in the center. It's got two lower flats, and that's how it mates up to the here. I know some of you guys aren't Glock people, so this is specific to a Glock. This doesn't have anything to do with us. Not only does it not have anything to do with us, it's not supported on the slide anyways because the slide is more narrow. So this little cutout that's here doesn't actually do anything because there's no material there. So that's kind of how it fits. It's about an exact fit right here. This doesn't move, doesn't twist. Oh, I'm destroying things. It doesn't move and doesn't twist, especially when there's screws in there. It's cut about that low. Now, this is a hard concept to say and or to have a conversation about. I say that because every Glock plate's going to be a little different. Whoever you buy it through. So no matter what manufacturer you decide to get it from, you know, it may sit flush with the back, it may sit high, it may sit low. I mean, there are going to be differences in appearance based off of who made that plate, right? So one of the things I want to talk about real quickly and briefly before we start putting some of the optics on here and see what they look like is I think we're going to probably post a vendor link on our webpage that would allow you to buy that plate, because we do have to have the plate. We don't necessarily have to have the optic, even though I do recommend it. We will have to have, at the very least, the plate for the setup. And I say that because we do see variances in tolerances when we talk about these plates, right? Because they're made from different people. You're not buying this from Glock, and you're not buying this from just a company. You're basically buying it from a third party who's making a product, right? And just, it's exact same things like these optics. If you were to really get high-end, micrometers or calipers and measure them, they're probably a thou or two off. There's going to be some differences between optics, right? And that's because each manufacturer does have their own tolerances. They are using different materials, different grades of aluminum. Maybe it's titanium in the case of, like, say, the 508T, which would come from Holosun. So there are a lot of differences between when we're talking about products here. And we want to make sure that we get the best fit. We want to make sure there's no play. We want to make sure when you get it back, you're good to go. So, and that's one of the things that I really want to speak on here for a second without this video going too long. I see a lot of times on the Reddit group, I see a lot of times on Google pages that come up like, hey, what screw should I use with my Optic ready Canik? Because every time I put my Optic on, it comes loose with the factory screws from Canik. Or when I put my plate on, my plate comes loose. And guys, I think a lot of, I'm not trying to discourage you from like, oh, hey, you should go sell your gun that's Optic ready and you should do this. Like, I don't think that's the right answer. But at the same time, we do look at what Canik has done over the years, and we do look at, they've put helix coils in some of their stuff. They're not direct thread into the slide. I mean, I myself have broken screws off just putting guns back together. Factory screws, putting plates back on and snap the screw. And it was like, okay, well, hang on here. This M3 screw holding on the plate, that's big and bulky and heavy, I'm not saying is a bad thing, because these use an M3 screw as well. It's sort of an industry standard, but you guys could have probably used a little bit better quality screw, or maybe those screws shouldn't go into a helix coil. Maybe they should be directly threaded into hardened steel. So there's a lot of different directions you can take there. Once again, this is no shame on Canik. They're manufacturing a product. They're way higher when we're talking about quality and knowledge than I am. Like, I'm a nobody compared to them. You who knows, you might not have even known who I was before this video. But the idea is, we're trying to sort of, I'm not going to say replicate and or compete, but we are sort of offering a service to overcome maybe some of those issues, right? So if you are looking at buying a gun, if you do want maybe something that sets a little bit lower, you want a little bit more availability, do your homework. What is it going to take to get a Canik plate? Where can I get Canik plates at? Do they only come in aluminum? Do they come in steel, right? So when you start talking about a Glock plate like this, we start getting into, this is a titanium plate. Do you want a steel plate? Do you want an aluminum plate? You've got a wide range of offerings versus what can I actually put on my factory Optic Canik, right? So, and once again, this is no shame in either direction, but this as a person that's building a project, you have to decide these things yourself. Which path do you want to take, right? So I recommend, obviously, having it cut for an MOS. We do not cut through factory sockets. If there's one already on the gun, you're sort of out of luck. But the idea is that we do, over time, and I don't have this recommendation right today, but by the time you go onto our webpage, we will have some sort of a recommended vendor for plates, right? So if you know somebody and you're like, hey, I know this guy who actually makes plates, or I know this company, like, personally, like, they're a small company, they do really good work. Feel free to share that information with us, because we do want to build a relationship with another small company, if at all possible, to, have plates be offered. And we don't want to carry plates. I don't want to sell you plates. I don't want to make money off you. You're more than welcome to get your plate from Amazon or eBay or, Billy Bob's gun shop, out by the, under the bridge by the highway. I don't care where you get your plate from, but the idea is we do want to make sure that there is an option for customers to get a quality plate that fits our cut extremely well, because in the end, we're supporting another business. In the end, you're supporting us as a business, and we're not having any issues, right? We are sort of looking out for you. So that's the idea here. If you know a company and you go, man, I really think you should connect with this company, have them reach out to me. Let them know, hey, look, it looks like Ncengravers looking for a partner to do these plates with, and you'd be, managing it yourself. They don't want to buy plates, but you'd be sort of managing it yourself, selling plates, and then they would ship it to them. Maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe you know a little guy who just is starting up and wants something. So there's an opportunity there. Once again, we may have a recommended service provider already on the webpage, that sells that part, or maybe there's more than one, right? We might have 2 or 3, and we say, hey, I don't know who's in stock, I don't know who's out of stock, but these are the guys that you want to check. These are the ones you want to get it from, because they make the best product, right? So that's kind of the idea. Let's take a look and see what it looks like. There's no screws in here, so we're going to be, a little bit careful here. This would be the RMR. My opinion is the RMR would sit as one of the lowest. So that would be sort of like this. And once again, guys, you can get different plates. This just happens to be a plate from Amazon. I think it was like $40 maybe, that the customer provided. It's a titanium plate, but this is a very low setup. So you can kind of see it right here. And of course, there's no rear iron sight in this optic itself. So, it's not going to work with the front sight. We do put the front sight back in. We will bag your rear sight. All that stuff's going to go back to you. But if you're looking for a fairly low setup, that's going to be kind of a nice setup there. I'm sure this is going to kind of back and forth this a couple times. This is not screwed in. This is the 407C. So that's pretty close. It's a little bit taller. You can see the glass sits a little bit higher. And of course, you could go with the 507C, the 508T. Like there's a lot of the 507 comp. There's a bunch of them that would fit on here. And then this is your full-sized 03 by Canik themselves, which sits significantly higher. You can see how that looks. Let's see if we can get you in here. Once again, I think a lot of this type of setup is designed more so for probably doing away with the front plate. I think the front sight. Like we're gonna put it back in, but it's probably not gonna work. Once again, there's a lot of other optics that would fit this. There's the Kraken, there's the Liberty, there's Sealy makes optics, the Wolf optic. I think they make another one called the Bear. There's Gideon. Literally the list goes on and on. There's the RMR HD, there's the RCR, once again, there is a wide range of optics that would fit this, just in the RMR plate. We haven't even gotten, over the top, haven't gotten about, hey, I really want to run a microdot. I really do want to run an EPS or an EPS carry, but I don't know if I want to live with that forever, right? And maybe instead of doing a dedicated RMSC socket, which would be like the 407K or the 507K, maybe you want to go with plate cut, because maybe later you do want to go with RMR. Like we can't change that later, right? So my recommendation would obviously be to, sort of either know 100% what you want to go with, that's the direction we're going to take, or it's no, I don't know what we're going to do. I think we're going to get a plate. I think we're going to run that smaller optic, which could be a direct mount like an EPS, but later I may want to go with an RMR. I may want to go with the Sealy, Wolfman or Wolfman 2 or Wolf Pro or whatever model it is. They make fairly decent optics too, so when we're talking about optics that are on the market, or maybe I want to go with, one of these other ones from, Swamp Fox, you know what I mean? So it obviously opens up the door of opportunity. Whenever you go to checkout, what's going to happen is it's going to give you a list of slide models that this does support, right? So, and as time goes on, this will be evolved. So we are talking about right now, this is the TP9SF, right? This is an older version of it. But what I can say is we are going to get into the Mete SF. We are going to get into, just the regular TP9. There's an Elite Combat. Like some of these, some of them are obviously optic ready. I'm just naming off slides. But the idea is, this, when you go to checkout, it's going to ask you, what are we doing? Here's a plate, and MOS plate. What's my optic? What's my color? Like there's some things that we're going to go through. Hey, you're going to get some notices. We're going to lose the rear sight when we do it. So there's a lot in there that you're going to sort of get warnings of, or you're also going to help us understand a little bit better of like, what are we actually doing here? As far as the work goes, when it comes in, I know what kind of slide's coming. But honestly, at the end of the day, I think it's a great opportunity for you guys to move into a plate system cut. I think it's the way to go. And hopefully that helps you make a choice on a smaller optic that is a direct mount, that works with the front sight, that has a built-in iron sight, or it helps you understand a little bit better of a plate system that allows for a wide range of optics that can be used on your gun.